It all started in 1948 in the Aston neighborhood of Birmingham. The gray and smoky atmosphere of post-World War II England was the biggest factor shaping Ozzy's character. Factory noises, the sounds of forging steel, and the endless rain. When John Michael Osbourne was born as a member of a poor family with 6 children, no one could have imagined that this dyslexic child would become the most recognized voice in the world. He experienced difficulties during his school years, got involved in petty crimes, and even went to prison after a burglary attempt. The OZZY tattoo he did on his fingers with his own hands while in prison was actually the first symbol of his rebellion and his stance against life. His passion for music began when he heard the Beatles. John Lennon was his hero.
After getting out of prison, Ozzy knew that music was the only way out. He put out an advertisement. Ozzy Zing Sings has his own amp. This advertisement led to the encounter that would change the fate of music. Tony Iommi and Bill Ward saw this ad while looking for a vocalist for their own band. Iommi knew Ozzy from their school years and actually didn't like him much because Ozzy was the school's naughty kid and Iommi was one of those who beat him up. However, with the participation of Geezer Butler, they formed the band Earth. When this quartet began playing blues and rock in those smoky pubs, they were laying the foundations of a new genre, though they weren't aware of it yet. Their music at that time carried more jazz-inspired blues tones. While the band's name was still Earth, a horror movie was playing at the cinema across from the studio where they rehearsed, Black Sabbath, directed by Mario Bava. One day, Tony Iommi turned to the band members and said, "In a world where people pay to be scared, why don't we make scary music?" This was a stroke of genius. At that moment, the tone of the music changed. They wrote their first song, Black Sabbath, using the chord known as the tritone, Diabolus in Musica, the devil's interval. This dark sound, combined with Ozzy's spine-chilling vocals saying, "What is this that stands before me? Figure in black which points at me," was the birth certificate of heavy metal. The era of Flower Children and peace songs had ended for this dark quartet. At the beginning of 1970, the band entered the studio to record their first album, Black Sabbath. No joke, this entire album was recorded in just 8 hours. It was like a live performance with almost no overdubs. While Ozzy sang the songs in the studio, he reflected all that Birmingham anger and fear into the microphone. When the album was released, critics hated them. They were called a bad Cream imitation. But the listeners felt something else. That dark, heavy, and threatening sound represented everything youth had suppressed within themselves. The album topped the charts. Black Sabbath began to turn into a phenomenon without any advertising campaign, purely through word of mouth. Before the wind of the first album had even died down, the Paranoid album arrived in the same year. Actually, the album's name was going to be War Pigs, but the record company changed it to Paranoid at the last minute because they were afraid of the Vietnam War reference. The song was written in the studio in just 5 minutes as a filler song to complete the album, but ironically, it became the biggest hit of Ozzy's career and heavy metal history. The political stance of War Pigs, the iconic riff of Iron Man, and that legendary intro starting with Ozzy saying, "I am Iron Man." Sabbath was now a world giant. American tours, sold-out concerts, and the extremes of the rock star lifestyle had begun. Success brought darkness with it. By the mid-70s, Ozzy and his bandmates were in the grip of drugs and alcohol. The albums Master of Reality and Volume 4 were recorded in this chaos. Especially the Volume 4 album was like a monument to the band's dangerous flirtation with cocaine. Ozzy had begun to wear out mentally and physically during this period. As creative control within the band shifted to Tony Iommi, Ozzy was moving away from the group. That wild energy on stage sometimes gave way to blank stares. Still, they managed to turn even this dark period into works of art, with songs like Snowblind. However, this was not a sustainable situation. At a time when the band's creativity was blocked, they retreated to a castle in Wales to find inspiration. The Sabbath Bloody Sabbath album became one of the peaks of the band's musicality. This sound, enriched by Rick Wakeman's keyboards, contained the most melodic forms of Ozzy's voice. However, things were getting harder for Ozzy. His father's death plunged him into a deep depression. Alcohol use was no longer an entertainment, but a way of escape. During the album's Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die, the cracks in the band deepened. Ozzy left the group for a short time, then returned, but the old magic was broken. The year 1979 was a total disaster for Ozzy. Black Sabbath had fired Ozzy from the band. He locked himself in a hotel room, didn't go out for months, just drank and thought his end had come. Everyone was saying, it's over, Ozzy is finished. But fate had other plans for him. Sharon, the daughter of manager Don Levy, was the person who pulled Ozzy out of that hotel room. Sharon was not only his life partner, but also the iron-fisted manager who built his career from scratch. Sharon believed in Ozzy and pressured him to form his own band. This was the beginning of one of the greatest comeback stories in rock history.
The biggest break in Ozzy's solo career was meeting the young guitar genius Randy Rhoads. Rhoads brought a brand new breath to rock guitar playing with his neoclassical style. When the Blizzard of Oz album came out, the world was in shock. Songs like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley proved that Ozzy was not just a singer in Sabbath's shadow, but a giant on his own. Ozzy's vocals had never been this sharp and energetic. Randy's guitar solos and Ozzy's theatrical vocals created a perfect contrast. Ozzy Osbourne was now becoming a bigger figure as a solo artist than Sabbath.
The year 1982 brought one of the greatest destructions in Ozzy's life. During a tour, the band's guitarist and Ozzy's closest friend, Randy Rhoads, died in a tragic plane crash. Ozzy couldn't recover for days after this event. He thought about quitting music. Randy was not just a musician, but the person who restored Ozzy's confidence in music. However, he had to continue the tour. On this road, stretching from nightclubs to stadiums, this great pain experienced by Ozzy would also form the basis of his aggressive and unpredictable behavior in the following years. From that day on, no guitarist could ever fully take Randy's place for Ozzy. The biggest legend that comes to mind when Ozzy Osbourne is mentioned is the 1982 Des Moines concert. A fan threw a live bat onto the stage, and Ozzy, thinking it was a plastic toy, bit the bat's head off. This incident suddenly turned him into the mainstream media's nightmare. Satan worshiper labels surrounded him everywhere. In another incident, even Sharon was shocked when he bit the head off a live pigeon he pulled from his pocket during a record company meeting. These scandals, ironically, increased Ozzy's popularity. He was now not just a musician, but a bad boy icon that parents feared and teenagers worshipped. In the mid-80s, Ozzy was drawn into a major legal battle over the song Suicide Solution. It was claimed that a young man committed suicide while listening to the song. Although Ozzy argued that the song was actually a warning about how alcohol slowly kills a person, families and conservative groups took a stand against him. The court process lasted for months. Ozzy found himself in the position of a defender of freedom of expression and art. He was eventually found innocent, but this lawsuit reinforced his dangerous man image. His music continued its chart success with The Ultimate Sin and No Rest for the Wicked albums. By the 90s, rock music was changing. Grunge and alternative rock were on the rise. Ozzy, on the other hand, achieved one of the biggest commercial successes of his career with the No More Tears album. Sharon had a brilliant idea to start their own festival. Ozfest, which started in 1996, became the biggest meeting point of the heavy metal world. Dozens of bands, from Pantera to Slipknot, became giants thanks to this festival. Ozzy had become a curator who kept a whole music genre alive, not just his own career. During this period, his collaboration with Zakk Wylde had further deepened and modernized his sound. In 2002, Ozzy did something no one expected. He opened the doors of his home to MTV cameras. The Osbournes reality show transformed Ozzy from a dark god into a sympathetic father who dealt with dogs at home, couldn't find the remote, but was devoted to his family. This program became a worldwide phenomenon. Ozzy had now become a name known even to grandmothers, not just metalheads. However, this fame had a price. Family members struggled with drug problems, and Ozzy's health began to deteriorate in front of the cameras. Still, this was a move that solidified Ozzy's place in popular culture. After years of separation, the original Black Sabbath lineup, Ozzy, Tony, Geezer, Bill, reunited several times. The 1997 reunion album and concerts were a dream come true for fans. When Ozzy took the stage with Sabbath, he took on a completely different energy. They were like the four horsemen of heavy metal. Although Bill Ward later left the lineup, the band decided to end their career at the peak by entering the Billboard charts at #1 with the album 13, released in 2013. For Ozzy, Sabbath was always like a mother's embrace he had to return to. The last decade has been spent with serious health problems for Ozzy. Parkinson's diagnosis, serious surgeries, pneumonia, and neck injuries. It was said many times that he can no longer take the stage, but he managed to come back every time. When he released the Ordinary Man album in 2020, the experience and sadness in his voice deeply affected the listeners. His collaborations with names like Elton John and Post Malone showed that he could appeal to every generation. Ozzy declared to the whole world that although he weakened physically, he lost nothing of his vocal power and passion for music. Ozzy, who entered the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Black Sabbath during his career, was also deemed worthy of this honor as a solo artist in 2024. Very few artists have been able to achieve this success both with their band and solo. Grammy Awards, Lifetime Achievement Awards, and trams named after him in Birmingham, Ozzy Osbourne has turned into a living monument. His music is today accepted not only as the representative of a genre, but as the cultural heritage of an era and a rebellion. He is not only the father of heavy metal, but also its greatest ambassador. So what makes Ozzy so special? Why do millions worship him despite his technical flaws? Because he is real. With his mistakes, his addictions, his naivete, and that unshakable honesty, he is one of us. When he stands on stage and says, "I love you," you really believe it. He is a raw energy, far from the phoniness of show business. His legacy is hidden not just in the Paranoid riff, but in the freedom he made you feel while making that music. Although thousands of bands will come and go in the world of heavy metal, none will be able to create the impact created by that raspy but enchanting voice. Although he had to say goodbye to touring life due to health problems, Ozzy Osbourne continues to produce in the studio. He proved he is still in shape by winning 2 more Grammys in 2023 with the Patient No. 9 album. He is a man who has defied death many times. In his own words, a medical miracle. Maybe he no longer runs onto the stage, maybe he can't do those famous frog jumps, but the moment he steps up to the microphone, that young man from Birmingham from 1970 is there again. Ozzy will stay among us forever as the soul of heavy metal.
We may have come to the end of the Ozzy Osbourne biography today, but his story begins anew in every guitar riff rising from a speaker. This life of 70-plus years, stretching from the dark factories of Birmingham to the peaks of Hollywood, has taught us one thing. No matter how much you fall, you must get back up and keep screaming. Ozzy's voice will continue to be the voice of all those crushed, excluded, and those who love the darkness. He is the greatest living miracle of rock music. Thank you, Ozzy, for showing us that one can sing